On my kicker tonight, the National Prayer Breakfast this year will go down as an unmitigated moral disaster. Ostensibly brought together by well-meaning religious intentions, political leaders proceeded this morning as if nothing happened. This, hours after they all knew of a school dormitory fire that had killed more than 10 girls, 16 precisely. The so-called prayers made no mention of the incident, its victims, or even the distressed families that were still making their way to Gilgil. I watched in utter shock and horror as speaker after speaker went on about their prayer breakfast business, making no mention of the Gilgil tragedy. So much for a prayer gathering. I hope this is not too harsh. This was Kenya's most heartless gatherings in recent times. This gathering simply lacked humanity. This prayer breakfast failed the most basic human test of empathy, that basic instinct of one human being feeling the pain of another. Those were heartless people, all of them. They did not care about the feelings of the parents of 16 innocent schoolgirls lying in cold ashes in the aftermath of the dormitory fire. I presume the girls were too distant for them to relate with. They did not know who they are. Clearly, none of them was a daughter of any of them. Just some obscure girls of some distant public school. These were anonymous little souls, not big enough to interfere with a grand party and the flow of a breakfast and a prayer. I waited for any of the speakers to show just some little trace of humanity. There was nothing. And when President William Ruto finally spoke about the incident, he called it an incident, he could not even get the name of the school right. And this he did at the tail end of the function. In fact, he had finished making his long address that was more about his record in office. The Utumishi fire tragedy came as a near afterthought during the photography session. This was truly cold of the entire leadership that gathered for the National Prayer Breakfast today. Yet all the while they afforded to crack jokes about football, specifically Arsenal. The members of parliament on their part sustained the habit of making a comedy of their singing. They joked about their voices and their lack of practice, and generally about how poor some of them were in singing. They laughed about it before proceeding to leave the joke. Then there were some couple of prayers from the podium, none of them making any mention or reference to the people that really needed prayers today. And those are the parents and relatives of the Utumishi School girls. Again, the National Prayer Breakfast will be remembered for the spiritual disaster it was today. Tonight, critics of this annual ritual are vindicated. The National Prayer Breakfast is not about prayers. It is just another political spectacle. For a keynote speaker this year, organizers drafted in Ugandan presidential advisor Chris Rwakasisi to share his life story as an illustration of the theme of this year's prayers, which is forgiveness and reconciliation. The guest of honor, who was a former powerful security minister in President Milton Obote's government, explained how he was pardoned by President Museveni and released from prison after 24 years. Unfortunately, there were no local illustrations of forgiveness and reconciliation in a prayer that did not even have representatives from the Kenyan political opposition. All that, in my view, was nevertheless overshadowed by the callous handling of the Utumishi School tragedy. That was a heartless national prayer breakfast. Heartless. That's my kicker.